Is collecting hoarding? Welcome to Yibo Reviews Everything, and today's topic is one I've covered on streams before, but mostly in jest. I think part of the reason is because I didn't want to know the answer to this question. Over the course of my public collecting over the last 5 years, I know that you just don't have to be a toy tuber to get overwhelmed with all this plastic. For me, I use the collecting part of my journey in the early goings as a way to get a little dopamine hit to get through some of the tougher days of the dark times. When I first moved into this house, the basement was a blank canvas. And with the discovery and pursuit of toy photography, I picked up so many figures and toys just because. Of course, I won't ignore the fact that there's also been a huge amount of figures I've wanted. And as we are in this renaissance of toy making, between domestic and import companies to third-party lines and Kickstarter campaigns, just about anything you'd be interested in is now in some form of articulated plastic. To pull back the curtain a bit, I also keep most of my boxes to my figures and took up a little more space than I'd like to admit in my garage. I've been slowly letting go of some McFarlane and various Legend boxes, but yeah, that extra resale value a box might bring you has kept me on the hook for more of the premium figures, though I'm still at the point of whether or not some of these remaining lines are worth the space. So yeah, on the outside, I know this can look bad. And guess what? Even on the inside, this can look bad. Well, after doing some research, let's see what kind of trouble I'm in. After doing some digging, it appears that the consensus is, drumroll please, collecting is not hoarding. Hooray! Yes! However, there are some important caveats I should mention, not just for you, but I need to keep these facts in the forefront of my brain because I know myself at this point, and sometimes I can get a little nuts. First off, it's typically not considered hoarding unless it becomes excessive and interferes with daily life. Hoarding is a mental health condition characterized by persistent accumulation of items to a point where they clutter living spaces and cause significant distress or impairment. Since we're collectors, I'll leave out the part that the items being acquired are deemed worthless or of minimal value because we know that's not true. While collecting can be a passion for many, it only becomes problematic when it starts to negatively impact a person's well-being or their relationships. In an article called Hoarders versus Collectors from Psychology Today, the main focus points are 1. A third of the American population, roughly 107 million people, collect one thing or another, and far fewer are hoarders. Research, number 2, has found that the biggest distinction between a hoarder and a collector is levels of organization. And 3, collectors also tend to have larger property sizes than hoarders. That last piece does strike a nerve with me because when I went from my starter home with my wife to our, again, slightly modest size home, but I had a basement to put toys in, that extra space did lead to buying more things to fill up the space. So it makes sense. That all being said, it does seem like this diagnosis comes down to an individual and their current position in life. If you're concerned about your collecting habits, as I've been about my own, here are some signs that you might be crossing the line into hoarding. Again, in reflecting back on the last 4 years, I do recall many times I've had some anxious live streams where I went on and on about the space down here, my basement. And I think it's because it did hit a nerve. It hit a nerve. So here's a few more little things to consider. I know I will certainly be keeping some of these in mind because a couple of them did hit close to home. Number 1 is the clutter. Guilty. Your collection is taking over your living space. making it difficult to move around or use rooms as intended. This is why my wife is very adamant that I keep my daddy toys down in the basement. She really dislikes when I start trying to push them up into the rest of the house. So while this space has gotten cluttered on me, part of that I do attribute to weekly live streams and toy photography and the whole content creator aspect to my journey. At least that's what I'm telling myself. Emotional distress is number 2. You feel anxious or overwhelmed by your collection. And I certainly have felt that way when looking around. As much as I love looking at my shelves, when I don't have them neat and posed or placed the way I want them to, yeah, that does cause me some anxiety. But when those moments happen, I am usually able to take a break, step back, take a deep breath, and get some reorganization done. It is something, once again, that you have to feel and acknowledge and address when those emotions start hitting. Third is relationship problems. So if your collecting is causing tension or conflict with loved ones, speaking for myself, I'm always making sure that my wife is down with the things that I purchase, only because collecting does have an expense along to it, and I want to make sure that we're both being as financially responsible with this as we can, while also just keeping my family happy. This last one I definitely did struggle with early on in my collecting journey, and that is difficulty letting go. I've been at a point now, after, again, almost 5 years of doing this publicly, where, yeah, if something isn't being photographed, if I don't feel a pull towards wanting to pose it around, play with it, take some story photos, any of the things, then it's time for it to go. I know there was that Netflix show with Does It Bring You Joy? And of course, when it comes to toys, sure, we can convince ourselves anything that we bring in here can bring us that level of joy. But an interesting memed reel short that's been making the rounds is, and I apologize for the nature of this metaphor, but if it was something that had poop on it, would you wash it off and keep it, or would you just throw that right in the garbage? When you think of your toys in that way, for me, that seems to help in regards to the revolving door of being a collector, wanting the new, celebrating the stuff that is near and dear, but then being realistic about the stuff that will bring someone else joy if it's not bringing you that happiness that you were looking for, you were searching for when you first picked it up. Bringing it all back to the opening, the answer is no, but also maybe. But it will require each person to take a hard look at themselves in the mirror. And as you've probably heard this expression at some point in your life before, the first and hardest part is admitting that there's a problem. So let's not try to get there, folks. Thank you for checking out the video. I know this is a topic that I've wanted to cover in more detail for a while. I hope you appreciate the little peek behind the curtain into my own current situation, and also to show you that these are tips for myself just as much as sharing them with all of you. And just so you know, you can become a member of Imbonia for the voting ability to decide what these weekly videos are going to be. And last but not least, every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I go live right here to talk about life and toys. So I hope to see you in the chat one of these days. Meantime, have a great rest of yours now.